This is our webinar organized within the Flash Ukraine program of Institut Convergence Migration. Our speaker today is Marina Keda. I just need to say in advance that we are recording this webinar and it will be published on YouTube channel. Marina is a Jean Monnet Fellow at the European University Institute in Florence, in Italy. In Ukraine, she is the head of the Center for European Studies at the National University Chernihiv Collegium. She has her research interests include the European Union cultural and migration policies, the concept of Europe and the European integration, the European history and identity. And in the most recent year, she has conducted several researches on the commitment of the Ukrainians and the Ukrainian war refugees to such values as democracy, freedom, Europeanness. And she is the academic coordinator of the Erasmus Plus Jean Monnet project, Studying Europe Educational Dimension. So we will proceed as follows. Marina, the floor is yours for about 30-40 minutes, and then we will proceed with some discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. So let me share my screen first. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So today I would like to talk about migration as an engine of Europeanness and talk about reshaping identity in time of war. Really one of the unexpected outcomes of Russian vast invasion of Ukraine is unprecedented shift in European identity. A surge in solidarity and deepening sense of Europeanness increased among Europeans and Ukrainians, including Ukrainian refugees. Meanwhile, this issue is much underrated in both migration and cultural studies. So in this presentation, I would like to share the results of actually two researchers concerning this rather important issue. Russian aggression against Ukraine since 2014, as we take it, resulted in over 2 million war refugees and internally displaced persons in 2020. It is due to the site of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And in 2022, with the full-scale invasion, this flow turned into the inevitable avalanche. In the slide, we can see the number of refugees from Ukraine recorded all over Europe. The statistics is for April 2024. So we see the reduction of numbers actually, because in January 2023, we had actually more than 8 million refugees from Ukraine recorded across Europe. And just a minute. And this huge influx resulted in significant shifts in European identity, including the perception of the concept of a refugee or forced migrant itself. European Union evident solidarity with Ukraine and its people resulted in activation of Temporary Protection Directive on the 4th of March 2022, and this allowed quick integration through automatic residence permits, access to the labor market and medical support. And even prior to Temporary Protection Directive activation, a number of grassroots initiatives were a sign of unprecedented bottom-up social acceptance. This resulted in scholarship debates about the Ukrainian refugee experience as the exceptional in comparison to other refugee groups. But while political, economic, and social issues became the point of priority attention, the cultural aspect of Ukrainian refugee policy stays much understudied. European identity rooted in values such as democracy, rule of law, and human rights is pivotal to the European Union cultural policy. At the same time, migration plays a crucial role in shaping this identity, fostering a shared sense of belonging and attachment to European Union values. So in this presentation, I will examine the Europeanness of Ukrainian refugees, exploring the historical, cultural, and political factors that contribute to their European identity. And I would like to study it from the twofold perspective: internal, so shifts in European Union identity of Ukrainian migrants, and external, so how European identity of Ukrainian refugees impacts the European community after the West invasion. As to the methodological aspect regarding regarding the multidisciplinary character of the research, we're dealing with a set of complex concepts, some of which do not have an established interpretation in the scholarship. Therefore, let us first focus on the variations in which we use these terms. First of all, this definition, Ukrainian 2022 migration case, this definition actually is justified by the fact that vast majority of Ukrainian war migrants arrived in the European Union countries in 2022. We also take into consideration the fact that Ukrainian war migration started in 2014 from the time of the annexation of Crimea and the outbreak of the armed conflict in the east of Ukraine, actually in Donbass and Lugansk region. Directed indication of the year 2022 in this concept does not limit us in the right to interpret the national policies for the future, as what is equally important, 2022 gave rise to the several very specific policies and practices that on board are being applied to Ukrainian war migrants in Europe, which let us regard this case as really as a special one, unique one, with a number of its very specific features. The interpretation of the term forced migration is also ambiguous in the absence of agreement among scholars in the established interpretation of the terms used to refer to people displaced by Russians who are in Ukraine. We turn to the latest version of the Asylum and Migration Glossary, 2022 version actually, developed by the European Migration Network, which gives us such definition of the forced migration as a migratory movement in which an element of coercion exists, including threats to life and livelihood, whether arising from natural or man-made causes. I will stop here just. One more document which helps us to distinguish between the definitions of these terms is European Union policy, actually a number of European Union policy documents, among which I would like to take a special attention onto the European Union Work Plan for Culture. It was edited in 2022 for the period of 2023-2026, and it is one of the most important documents for this Ukrainian 2022 migration case regarding the cultural aspects of the policies for Ukrainian war migrants. Its first guiding principle is culture, including cultural heritage, has an intrinsic value and contributes to strengthening European identity. Among its specific issues are the role of culture for promoting of common European identity, health and well-being, access to culture, cultural participation and democracy, the role of libraries and international cultural relations, including Ukraine. The document reflects the international situation influenced by the Russian war in Ukraine. It is for the first time, actually, when one country, Ukraine in this case, became a point of special attention of such high-level European Union policy document. Actually, Ukraine has been mentioned in this document 15 times, direct mentioning 15 times. No other country never ever was under such attention. The aspect which can contribute to the conceptual approach of our research is that not using the terms migrants and refugees, the resolution instead suggests another concept of displaced people from Ukraine. Such official definition reduces the degree of debate about the terminology. Thus, the terms war migrant and refugee were used in this presentation in the context of forced migration, meaning persons displaced as a result of Russia's war aggression against Ukraine. While many scientific sources use the term migrant in the most general meaning, the 2022 migration wave gives us a reason to apply the term refugee in its broad meaning. The United Nations Refugee Agency, the body specialized in refugee protection, defines refugees as persons who flee their countries because of armed conflicts or persecution, seeking asylum status to protect them. In contrast, migrants look for better life by finding work and in some cases for education or family reunion. The same terms we apply as synonyms to temporary displaced persons who got their special status due to the activation of TPD, which can thus be distinguished into a separate legal category and managed by a separate EU migration policy instrument. In other words, my research on this presentation's term refugee refers to all displaced persons fleeing war, including those covered by Temporary Protection Directive, asylum, and refugees. Although if we talk in statistical terms in this case study, we are dealing mainly with displaced persons and to much lesser extent with those who have been officially granted refugee status or those who have applied for asyls. The term culture we use in its holistic, broad interpretation suggested by UNESCO in the context of migration, and the term which is maybe mostly controversial and mostly discussed is the term of Europeanness. Europeanness we understand as a sense of common belonging to European identity on the same level as the sense of national or local belonging. And we will interpret it in this way in this research, which is well acknowledged in the literature and more importantly in the social reality, actually, or like a variant self-understanding as Europeans. Let me suggest some versions some versions of this term, which is suggested by scholarship. The discursive construction of Europeanness can be traced through political, social aspects, although in my research I would like to concentrate on its cultural dimension. In contrast to concepts of Europeanization in legal scholarship and the political sciences, the focus here is less on institutional integration processes and more on the emergence of shared sense of Europeanness. Beyond histories of European political integration and of the intellectual and elite movements that have supported this process, scholars are paying increased attention to the constructness of European identities and to the multiplicity of ways in which this construction happens. Discursive construction of Europeanness can be traced in the political realm as well as in the social and natural sciences. On everyday level, concepts of Europe and what it means to be European have been constructed through sports, music, through different cultural activities, which also cultural participation as well, which is also a subject of attention in my research. So my research taking the migration as the central point agrees the necessity to involve the instruments of cultural policies into migration governance. Migration can be really a particularly useful lens through which to view such Europeanization. We now see an emphasis on multiple shifting and hybrid identities, on trans migrants who oscillate between countries and between nations, ethnic and cosmopolitan affiliations, and on the transnational networks and institutions they build and sustain. Considering Europeanness with the supranational, but also regional, cultural, religious, ethnic, and racial connotations can provide an additional fruitful dimension to such inquiries. The concept of European identity remains rather contested and ambiguous as the term identity has become in historical and social science writing. It can be opaque and problematic when applied to groups. And we can analyze it through historical dimensions. Historians such as Konrad Jarausch furthermore, have warned against the temptation to historically construct a homogeneous or overly narrow concept of European identity. This may run or would run the risk of repeating 19th century efforts by historians engaged in the construction of national identities. Complex and contradictory cultures of memory in Eastern, Western, and Central Europe, he argues, demonstrate why it is impossible to fork a single narrative of European history. A most recent scholarship thus assumes European identity to be a pathwork of diverse and overlapping identifications. How to measure the Europeanness? One of the limitations of such research onto the Europeanness concerns the question how to measure it. Really, deciphering the true course of Europeanness is not easy, but not easy doesn't mean not possible. There is no easy solution, all the more since no clear and homogeneous idea of what Europe should be exists, but only a dynamic plurality of ideas and rhythms which aspire to finding common ground within the framework of diversity. This circumstance, far from being an obstacle, it is the greatest virtue since it inherently affirms the feeling of belonging to that higher order spiritual community that is Europe, or what Europe is. New sensibilities demand the construction of this order using not only quantitative, but also to a greater degree qualitative parameters. It is all about working towards a common identity, which from the point of view of human diversity, both individual and collectual, should have as a basis and intangible beginning of the old and yet new European identity, mankind, and its individual, social, and transcendent rights. In this context, understanding Europeanness through the attachment to common values provides a list of measurable items. Why so important? Why the significance? Let us talk about the significance of Europeanness. So why it is so important? One of the mainstream dimensions of European cultural policy, actually, it is the construction of this Europeanness, which one of the scholars at Tora Recchi mentioned as Europe's root problem. We can maybe here also suggest the citation from Jean Monnet, famous phrase, it is disputable that if I had to start everything from the very beginning, I would start from culture, meaning that European integration should start from the formation of this common European identity. Despite a number of diverse publications, scholars in majority agree that Europeanness aims to arouse feeling of belonging to the European Union. The promotion of Europeanness at the European Union level does not constitute an overarching identity policy that imposes a homogeneous interpretation of European identity. Rather, it is a process of negotiation in which various entrepreneurs of Europeanness within and outside the European Union, institutes, invent, and communicate representation of Europe. One more point of view is that the members of the European Union are distinct from each other in terms of language, ethnicity, culture, and branches of the church, but they share some common values, traditions, and cultural heritage. A common history and secure values are accepted as the unifying aspects of European identity. They may differ culturally from each other, but they are attached to some core values related to the historical background of Europe. The analysis of the publication and European Union official documents allows us to conclude that the concept of European identity is one of the key concepts revolves around the values such as democracy, rule of law, social justice, respect for human rights, and is among the strategic priorities of the latest cultural policy European Union documents. Ukrainian migrants contribute considerably into shaping this identity, providing a shared sense of belonging and attachment to European values. And these values are directly mentioned in the Article 2 of the Treaty on European Union. So the Union is founded on the values of respect for human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, rule of law, respect for human rights, including the rights of persons belonging to minorities. And those values are common to the member states in a society in which prevail pluralism, non-discrimination, tolerance, justice, solidarity, and equality between men and women. Why so matters? Because, for example, well, it led us to predict certain policies. For example, for decades before Brexit, Britons have scored on top of Eurobarometer as the European Union citizens least willing to call themselves Europeans. And we know what happened in some years. But collective identification really matters. A poor sense of Europeanness means no solidarity with other Europeans. No solidarity translates into little public support to European institutions when they endeavor to impose redistributive policies or to pool member states' resources. That is extremely important at the time of war, which is now not somewhere far, but right on the borders of the European Union. So the objective measure of Europeanness is the European Commission's regular verdict in its capacity as guardian of the treaty on how member states shape up in meeting their obligations to the community. At the same time, within the term of refugee governance, the level of European identity is recognized as a factor fostering cultural integration of migrants. There are a number of publications concerning this topic. So being measured, it contributes to one more complicated aspect of migration governance, to measuring the level of refugee integration into hosting society. And measuring of refugee integration is also quite a difficult problem and disputable one. One more tool for measurement of this Europeanness is solidarity. The warm acceptance of Ukrainian refugees by Ukrainian countries in 2022 became a real phenomenon and the subject of scientific discourse. Some scholars, Lenka Dražanova, for example, Hargrava, in the analysis of positive narratives around Ukrainians, mentioned that they are rooted in the sense of cultural and historical proximity of European and Ukrainians. Involvement of the concept of Europeanness, to my mind, let us proceed with these reflections and to delve deeper into the factors which explain this phenomenon. So I would like to consider the roots of Europeanness among Ukrainian refugees, which also drive this perception and increase European solidarity towards Ukrainian refugees in the European Union. And in this aspect, my empirical study, which follows the theoretical part of the research, is based on a survey comprising a questionnaire and direct interviews. The study was held from December 2022 to June, actually, 2023, and included a quantitative survey. Number is 524 respondents, and semi-structured interviews, 56 semi-structured interviews. The survey's target group respondents interviewees are temporarily displaced persons fleeing war in Ukraine who arrived at European Union countries after February 2024. Geographically, it covers all 27 European Union countries. The data collected method is self-filling the questionnaire and conducting in-depth direct interviews. The survey aimed to find out the correlation between European cultural policies, including practices, and the cultural needs and activities of war migrants from Ukraine. It was based on the probability sampling technique of random sampling, the research error with confident probability of no more than 0.1%. The survey questionnaire was designed according to the results of analysis of the latest relevant researches, EU cultural policy documents, and Eurobarometer data. It comprised 42 questions, which they were divided into 3 thematic blocks: general respondent profiles, cultural participation, and the concept of Europe. The third block actually contains questions concerning the level of Europeanness, correlation between European and national identities, between cultural expectations and the reality in the hosting country, preferences among European values, community of European and Ukrainian history and culture. So this third block concerns directly the point which we are discussing now. The data from the survey is complemented with data from 56 in-depth semi-structured interviews, as it allowed to delve deeper into the particular topics of interest. This was meant to ensure that diverse life trajectories and cultural experiences would be included into the study. The main aim of the interviews was to reveal those aspects and complicated points which are not easy to frame and to measure statistically, and to gain an in-depth understanding of motivations behind respondents' actions. All the interviews were held by the author personally through direct face-to-face communication with interviewees in Poland, Czech Republic, in Italy, and Ukraine. In particular, in Ukraine, I communicated with the refugees who have already returned from Europe. A number of other interviews were recorded via Zoom. The results presented in this contribution should be interpreted according to the limitations, surely, of the methodology and the ongoing movements of displaced persons within Europe. This sample for the survey was based on the data of UNHCR for each European Union country for the period of the research. The result reflects the situation and intentions on TPDs at the period of data collection, which may subsequently change depending on a wide range of factors, what we actually observe now. And the sample is actually not high, but at the same time, the survey results reveal main tendencies and may serve as a platform for further, more deep researches. Let us speak about general profile of survey respondents. In our survey, we have 91% of women, men between age 18 and 60 years are not allowed to leave Ukraine, and their part in the survey is only 9%. Most respondents, actually nearly 80%, of 25-54 age. High level of education also characterized the Ukrainian migration, Ukrainian migration case, because nearly 65% of women between 30 and 34 have completely tertiary education, compared with 46% in the European Union. And among our respondents, the level is even higher. We have 73% of respondents with higher education, and even 8% with scientific degrees. During the research period, 45% of respondents mentioned that they were employed or had permanent work in the country of destination and or in Ukraine, going on working remotely. An extremely high level of uncertainty also justifies the relevance of cultural practices as a policy instrument. Nearly 32% of Ukrainian war refugees are not sure about their will to come back home soon or after the war, while 58% evidence this will. This figure is reducing the longer the war goes on, but this factor should also be considered when choosing adaptation or inclusion or naturalization or integration in its wide meaning, if we use this term in wide meaning, practices and programs for refugees. On coming back home, these people will bring European experience, European way of life, and strengthen European values in Ukraine. And now directly about the results. So to what extent do you feel European? This was the first question concerning Europeanness directly. And we have such results. The study found that 81% of surveyed Ukrainian refugees, I speak now about refugees directly, who arrived to Europe after 24th of February 2022, felt totally or partially European. Absolutely, 44%, also rather a high figure. Next question concerned the correlation between European and national identification. And actually, this is the question from Eurobarometer survey, which does not cover Ukrainians, so we included it in our study. And what we see here is that Europeanness does not prevent from feeling Ukrainian, so national identity prevails. 58% feel Ukrainians, 38 feel equally Ukrainians and European. And by the way, this figure is rather high, I would say. 35% feel Ukrainian, 23% feel more Ukrainian than European, and 38.5% feel equally European and Ukrainian. We can compare this data with the data of our research. This research was held within the SEED project, which was kindly mentioned by Agnieszka at the presentation. This project, Studying Europe Educational Dimension, was aimed at the research of the formation and perception of European values among the population of Chernihiv region. I'm from Chernihiv region, I'm from Chernihiv, and this region, as we see at the map, it is the third biggest region in Ukraine. One more aspect which justifies this research is that it is a border region. So it is extremely important to understand the feelings and self-identification of the people who live there. Actually, we have planned that research before the vast invasion. It was our intention to measure somehow this level of Europeanness among the population of this big, huge, actually, border region. But unfortunately, the project started just in 2022, and these war circumstances evidenced, instead of research, yes, they evidenced the attachment of Ukrainians, the attachment of the population of this region to European values, because Chernihiv was partially occupied, it was surrounded, 2/3 of the Chernihiv region was occupied, and we should thank to people, to population of this region who stood up and didn't give up, actually. And together with the military forces of Ukraine, resisted this aggression, evidencing their attachment to European values. But the research, what are the results of this research? This research covered 800 of respondents and was held in May, June 2023. And it turned out that almost 2/3 of the population of the region share this feeling of European identity. 59% in general, 24 which replied yes completely, and 35 yes partially European. 24% do not consider themselves Europeans. And one actually among various social demographic groups, young people 71%, and residents of cities feel most European. This age group much more easily perceive and assimilate new norms and features of the social system which penetrate into Ukraine from developed countries, and also do not have a large number of already formed stereotypes behind them. In the second case, we again see the positive consequences of reforms within the framework of the association agreement between Ukraine and the European Union. Next, the respondents had to choose one of the statements which in different proportions contained a comparison of themselves as Ukrainians and Europeans, again, about this Ukrainian correlation between Ukrainian and European identity. And what do we see here? That 54%, actually 55% feel Ukrainian, 28 feel more Ukrainian than European, and 15 feel equally Ukrainian and European. And we can conclude from this that this feeling of Europeanness is, in some aspects, nearly 20% higher among the Ukrainian refugees who found refuge in Europe than among the local population of Ukraine. Moreover, the obtained data have no fundamental differences in any of the socio-demographic sections that we can conducted in the process of analyzing the obtained results. To underline such state of self-identification of the population, let me cite here the leader of the sociological group rating, Oleksiy Antipovich. He told rather an interesting statement that Putin talks a lot of silly things, but I see one trend. He probably did more for Ukraine and Ukrainians than 30 years of independence or any of our presidents. Why do I think so because a year ago, only 8 of 10 Ukrainians identified primarily or as citizens of Ukraine. Today, they are 10 of 10 of them. If in our country, 3 of 10 Ukrainians call themselves Europeans, then the current estimate is 6, almost 7. This is just one of the remarks which testify that during the war, Ukraine and Ukrainians actually became extremely united, started to feel commonality, this solidarity with the land, with the country, and their self-identification increased in many aspects. It is also worth paying attention to the fact that the result of our research completely coincides with the data provided by the author of the quote by this sociological company. This fact gives every reason to assert that in the matter of self-identification, Chernihiv region does not fall out of the national context, and this data can be easily compared. What are the drivers of such figures? This current high level of Europeanness has occurred gradually since Ukraine's independence in 2005. 36%, as we see from this slide, of Ukrainians identified as European. 16 years later, for example, in 2021, the percentage had increased to 41%, and then in just 2 years, in 2023, it increased to 51%. With the black figures are the results of our research, and with blue figures are the results of the research of two sociological groups, Rating Group and Razumkov Center. So this figure gives us the dynamics of increasing of this Europeanness. To our opinion, well, it's worth bearing in mind that Ukrainian refugees, actually, who are they? They are Ukrainians whose concept of Europe was formed not only in recent decades. To our opinion, their concept of Europe was formed over the centuries. Its formation was influenced by a number of factors, which I would like to consider just at least in some words. First is the historical fact. Ukraine has a long and complex history. For centuries, Ukraine has been a crossroad between East and West, with its territory being part of various states and empires. But the first factor that brought European identity of Ukrainians is that it is a result of a long history of the development of Ukraine within the context of European civilization. In terms of the evolution of civilization, the Ukrainian lands have been part of the European oikoumene for a long period of history. Most Ukrainian territories were under European versus ancient times. We can, for example, mention the Greek colonies on the territory of North Black Sea region with its democratical principles. At medieval epoch, its political elites created alliances with European states. So we can, for example, mention the dynasty policy of Yaroslav the Wise, when princes of Kiev Rus took European thrones, for example, French Queen Anna Yaroslavlna, and less known, even in Ukraine, less known empress. She was an empress of the Saint Roman Empire, Evpraxia Vsevolodivna, or Praxeda. Elizabeth, the Queen of Norway and Denmark. Later, in early modern age, the Cossacks' political elites concluded alliances with European states. For example, the political projects of that time, which Ivan Vygotsky tried to implement with Poland, Ivan Mazepa. We can also mention him of Filip Orlik with Sweden, were for a long time interpreted by Russian scholarship as betrayal. Meanwhile, intellectual migrants from Ukrainian lands, even in 16th century, in their works actively emphasized the truth. That was actually the title of Ukrainian lands at that time, as its synonyms belonged to European civilization, while Moscovia state belonged to, like they wrote in their works, to Wild Asia. For example, we can read the works of Stanislav Orekhovsky, of Yuri Dorogobych, of Ipatий Poti, and so on. One more examples of such difference between civilization, I would say difference, is this map, which you can see at this slide. This is a map of Guillaume de Lille, map of the second half of 16th century. I just accidentally found it in this Istituto Geografico Militare in Firenze in Italy. And what we can see here, Ucrania, clearly written, clearly title of the region, and Moscovia. What Russia does now, Russia and Putin in particular incorporates Ukrainian history. He tries to represent the history of Ukraine as a part of Russian history, but nothing of the kind. If we delve deeper into history, if we study the maps, and there are lots of such maps. This is just an accidental example. We can easily understand that the difference is a really great civilizational difference. And politically, Ukraine has been moving actively towards the West, especially actively in recent years, with a focus on democratic values and human rights. And Ukraine's desire to join the European Union and NATO has been a significant factor in its political development, with the country seeking closer ties with the West. But for a long time, when the Ukrainian lands were part of Russian states, first the Russian Empire, then of the totalitarian Soviet Union, that long historical period, cultural manifestation of Ukrainianness were actually distracted, especially its language and culture in general, which usually defines actually the nation. Ideas about the borders with Europe were imposed through the active use of the concept West, and by substitution, actually, these two concepts, the concept of Europe was substituted with concept of Europe with its neutral connotation was substituted by the concept West with its quite negative connotation. The rapid changes that took place in the concept of Europe in the minds of Ukrainians became possible after 1991, actually with the collapse of the Soviet Union, which opened the possibility for free, open expressions of the positive image of Europe. And until 2014, Ukraine demonstrated a wise balance in policy between the East and the West, between Europe and Russia. In 2013-2014 years, actually in 2014, with annexation of Crimea and beginning of the war, aggression of Russia against Ukraine, these years became like a turning point for Ukraine's self-awareness and strengthening of the civilizational role, not as a buffer between civilizations, but namely as a part of the European cultural heritage. European, in the meaning European Union borders, became much more flexible after canceling the visa regime with Ukraine. The war started by Russia in 2014 turned into vast invasion of Ukraine in 2022, and it was the point of rapid shifts in the perception of mental borders between European Union and Ukraine, Europe and East. On June 2022, the European Union granted Ukraine the candidate status, recognizing that actually this is a citation from Josep Borrell's speech: the Ukrainian people belong to European family. Ukraine's future is within the European Union. So negative image of the West as an integral part of the more neutral concept of Europe was multiplied by Soviet Union ideology propaganda, and nevertheless, even by discrimination against Ukrainian culture, physical destruction of Ukrainian intelligence, Holodomor of ordinary Ukrainian people, the USSR could not banish this nation's genetic code. After the gaining independence in 1991, Ukraine announced the European choice of future development and fixed it into the constitution. And the ongoing war is the best proof of Ukrainian Europeanness, which is defended with its blood, actually. The great majority of the respondents of the survey mentioned that they are feeling European and pointed how that they feel Ukrainians to the same degree as Europeans. So this 2022 migration case has undoubtedly changed the concept of European cultural borders for both sides, for Ukraine and for Europe. And in the ongoing war, Ukraine defends its civilizational choice and basic human values. When we take into consideration cultural aspect, let me immediately, as we are running out of time, shift to the European values. The increase of Europeanness is attributed to a growing association with European values such as human rights, social justice, democracy, indicating a shift away from Soviet and Russian cultural ties. Ukrainian association with European values such as respect for human rights, social justice, freedom and democracy increased significantly from 2017, as we can see it at this slide and at this table, and we see that freedom is one of the most preferable values for Ukrainians: freedom, democracy, humanity. Statistically, the most significant increase of Ukrainians who identify with European cultural traditions occurred in the central, from 6 to 12%, and eastern, from 6 to 9.5% regions of Ukraine. Identifying with Soviet and Russian cultural traditions decreased in all regions of Ukraine. This may implicate the final break of Ukrainians from the post-Soviet past. And this slide, this table, is the result of the research of European values among the Ukrainian refugees. What do we see? What do we see here? The research found that the most important European values for Ukrainian refugees are respect to human rights, important to 83% of respondents; tolerance, 52%; social justice, 51%; and democracy. So the range of these values are a bit different among Ukrainian refugees who found refuge in European Union countries and among the general population of Ukraine, even nowadays. And the value which is leading really, and interviews give just perfect and sometimes very, very emotional description of this value: respect to human dignity, especially among the youth. We see how high it is rated in 82%. How many time do I have, Agnieszka, to proceed? Because I can stop here actually, and I have add some more information about
5 more minutes. Would it be okay?
Okay, thank you. Then one more dimension of this research concerning the impact of Ukrainian refugees onto the European community. From my respondents, very many answered that Europeans know very few about Ukraine, know very little about Ukraine. The refugee crisis also expanded the borders of European identity among Europeans, including Ukraine as the initial part of European civilization. Ukrainian refugees contributed in building new positive image of Ukraine into the consciousness of ordinary Europeans. The study shows that at the time of survey, there were still many prejudices and superstitions about the image of Ukraine and its inhabitants, about Ukrainians, and especially Ukrainian refugees, even among the ordinary Europeans, which refugees on the ground were trying to dispel. For example, to the question, do you agree that Europeans know little about Ukraine? Please rate on a scale from 1 to 5, where 1 do not agree and 5 completely agree. 78% agreed, with a score from 3 to 5. Of these, 54 and 7% rated this indicator at 4 and 5 points, and thus 30% of respondents strongly agree, while 24% agree that ordinary Europeans know little about Ukraine. And at the next slide, I would like you to suggest some citations. I will not read every of it. I think it will be available in video, and one can stop the video and read it. So when we came, the interviewees said that the most of the population was not interested in Ukraine before the large-scale invasion. When we came here, this is a citation, when we came here, few knew where Ukraine was, what Ukraine was. They got to know about it because the war started here. And one more citation from Netherlands. I think that that what the world is surprised by in Ukraine, what Europe is surprised by in Ukraine, is that we are very similar to them. We have a very similar culture, and it is not something completely different, incomprehensible. Moreover, they are very surprised that we have not come down from palm trees, that we are not from dugouts, that we have education, that we know how to use the internet, the telephone, and so on. At first, there were even questions about whether children knew how to use computer and whether they had ever seen them. So it is very strange, very scary, and very offensive that this is the impression of Ukrainians in the country, in the world. Almost all interviews mentioned a high level of awareness about Ukraine after the war started. And the highest level of awareness about Ukraine demonstrated those people who worked at educational institutions. There are some also citations from such, but I will not stop at them. And however, many interviewees emphasize the existence of several prejudices about Ukrainian refugees among ordinary residents. Ukrainian migrants produce narratives about Ukraine that contributed to, and to some extent even filling the media space, telling about their Europeanness, emphasizing the commonality of history and culture. For example, citation, we tell them about Ukraine because they know that Ukraine is a poor country. They talk about it as if it were the 1990s. We tell them what kind of medicine we have, what kind of country we are, what kind of information structure, what kind of internet, what kind of services we have. What does it mean? In other words, Ukrainian migrants are changing the discourse in host countries about migrants, about identities, about shared history and culture. For the first time, a migrant is perceived as one of their own from Europe, from a country with a highly formed European identity. The image of Ukraine is being transformed, and now it is being perceived not as a fragment of the USSR, but as a separate country fighting for its independence and for its European choice. Several respondents mentioned that inhabitants of their hosting country knew about Ukraine from Russian media, indicating the strong influence of Russian propaganda on the perception of the events. In this aspect, Ukrainian refugees offered a version alternative to Russian propaganda media. They broadcasted a positive image of the country through numerous events, meetings, which refugees organized themselves, through ordinary conversations with ordinary residents of host settlements. Ukrainian refugees therefore became such single agent who do field works, substituting cultural and media industries and conducting disinformation campaigns, conveying to ordinary Europeans what they may not hear and may not see due to the weak outreach of Ukrainian national institutions or their representatives responsible for disseminating abroad the positive image of Ukraine. Two more maybe slides. This is the concept of state and financial sectors by Ukrainians in general. This is a research. This is a result of not my research, but it can complement the results of my research. It was held by the Gradus company. This concerns state and financial sectors. And one more slide concerning the concept of services by Ukrainians, by Ukrainian refugees. So in many aspects, Ukrainian refugees appreciated more highly the services, the Ukrainian services in comparison to Europeans. But if we compare such points as obedience to law and order, as respect to democratic freedom, less level of corruption, or its absence, surely prevalate European countries. So to conclude, we can talk about advantages and challenges concerning the result of this research. The advantages: this high level of Europeanness among Ukrainian refugees help European Union migration policy. The higher the level of Europeanness among the migrants, the easier it is for their inclusion and integration. The second most valuable aspect is that refugees could also contribute to Ukraine's development. If the majority of Ukrainian refugees eventually move back home after the war, they will help build a country with these values and identities. But there are some challenges which also should be taken into consideration. The longer war lasts, the number of Ukrainians who want to return home decreases, unfortunately. From June 2022 to September 2023, the number of Ukrainians who wanted to stay in Europe and not return back increased from 7 to 18%, significant increasing. This is an obvious demographic threat for Ukraine, unfortunately. And sentiments about Ukrainians, about Ukraine's rather promising future, sentiments among Ukrainians about Ukraine's rather promising future reduced by 10% between April 22 and September 2023. Ukrainians put high expectations on European Union help in this war, and if Europe stops providing this aid to Ukraine in their fight against Russia, or if Ukraine is not adopted into European Union, Ukrainians may feel disappointed in European Union project. I will stop here because there are many dimensions and aspects which we can discuss. You're welcome with questions and discussions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Marina. So I open the discussion now. Does anyone have a question? Thomas, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Marina, for your presentation. It's very, very interesting. And I've got a few questions. I noticed that 3/4 of your sample among refugees have a higher education degree. So do you think that their response is also influenced by their level of education? And by and large, have you noticed a difference between the different groups or categories and between class of people? I've got a second question. We ourselves are undertaking a longitudinal survey among the Ukrainians in Europe. We got 1,000 respondents for each wave. And we also noticed that even if there is a strong identification to Europe, there is also a declining sense of trust towards Ukrainian authorities for the end of the war. And do you think that there is a link between both at all, between a growing trust in the European institution related to a declining trust in Ukrainian authorities? That's my second question.
Thank you, Thomas. Yes, I think that education can influence the questions, because in my research, the number of respondents with higher education is rather high, and general statistics is nearly 70% of Ukrainian refugees are women with children and women with higher education. Surely it influences their European choice. Certain comparison also, I think, should be traced between age categories. Also quite an interesting point for further researches. As to the increasing trust to European values and European Union institutions and decreasing trust to Ukrainian authorities, well, I think it is quite a natural process. Ukrainians rely very much on the help of European Union, and the decrease in trust to Ukrainian authorities is closely connected to the politics of Ukrainian authorities now. You know that there is a strong discussion about the level of democracy of Ukraine, and especially in the light of recent news about this new version of the law on mobilization, about expected elections. Should we hold them? May we hold them? Is it legal? Is it illegal? And so on. And the opposition grows, unfortunately. If the first period of war, 2022, was quite different in comparison to the situation of what we have now, the trust to the president decreasing due to all statistical researches, unfortunately, not extremely, but increasing. And these new political decisions concerning bringing back men from European Union also, so it is a point of just several days, so we do not know how it will go on. This also, to a certain degree, influences the mood, the attitudes of general population, surely. So very much we should talk about democracy at times of war. Also a very interesting point is democracy at times of war, but it can be a point for separate lecture even, because we have quite much statistics concerning the function of democratic institutions in Ukraine. Now we have this situation with the expiring of the presidential term of Zelensky and the possibility. Actually, it is difficult even to discuss the possibility of elections, presidential elections in times of war, when we have nearly half of population displaced, internally displaced people. So it is even technically difficult to discuss. But legal procedure is another dimension for this discussion. But nevertheless, I think that it should take place also. So,
Olivier? Yes, Olivier?
Oui, bonjour. Hi, Marina. It was really nice listening to you. Very rich presentation. I cannot put my webcam. Sorry, I have an issue with it, so hopefully you can hear me. I had two small questions. The first one is regarding what you mentioned about the perception of Ukrainians by European. And actually, I had a question about the self-perception of Ukrainians regarding their status, being refugees or migrants, because this is an issue we have discussed several times in this webinar. And I was wondering whether the belonging to Europeanness and the more you feel European, the less you feel you're a migrant or a refugee. And for instance, the status of asylum seeker that is applying to Afghan or Iraqi or Syrian will not apply then to Ukrainian. And I was wondering whether you have this kind of correlation to see whether a Ukrainian who is not feeling this strong European would have a better understanding of himself or herself being a forced migrant and possibly an asylum seeker, because it was not a choice. So just a tricky question, but just because it is something we have observed several times, that absolutely, I mean, Ukrainians are not considering themselves the same as, very different, basically, from other people fleeing a war, namely Afghan or Syrian. And the second question was about the global results you have presented. So as far as I understand, you have aggregated all the results from different countries into these European results, but, and you didn't have time, of course, to present details in each country, member states of the EU. But if you have these results and you have some analysis on it, I would be interested to know whether, again, the shared belonging to Europeanness might be correlated to the pre-existence of an Ukrainian diaspora in the country. I am traveling a lot to Spain and to Italy, and I can see a big difference between the Ukrainians in France and the Ukrainians in Spain and in Italy, because you have a lot of Ukrainians already established for 15, 20 years, having the local, I mean, the European citizenship. So I was wondering whether this could be a driver also. If you're alone in France and having not so many contact with the local Ukrainians, let's say, maybe you would not have this possibility to feel so much European. But if you are liaising with Ukrainians who are already feeling very European, maybe it's helping you. So I was just wondering whether these differences exist in your analysis between, again, Italy, Spain, Poland, of course, on one side, and France and other countries which are not having this very strong diaspora. Thank you.
Can I add to this question? It would be, I don't know if you can respond, but would be also interested if there is a difference in the responses according to the country where there is a strong Euroscepticism, like Hungary, Slovakia, or
yes. Yes, surely this migration case also arose this controversial attitudes in different countries. I mean, among political elites, and which use it with political purposes. But really, I didn't take this political dimension and economical dimension. I tried to concentrate my attention primarily onto cultural dimensions, and in particular to study the participation of Ukrainian migrants in cultural practices, because due to the previous researches held in European Union or European scholars, Ukrainians among 16 ethnic groups demonstrate first and the second place among visiting different cultural activities. It means that we can regard this cultural participation as a tool for certain cultural policies to obtain certain outcomes. For example, for the integration, I mean, in all dimensions of this term, because the term is also rather vague. As to the peculiarities of different countries, no, I didn't try because it should be surely very high number of respondents. I think that 1,000, not less than 1,000 in each country. So it needs certain financiation, and it then will give us certain results which let's outline scientifically, yes, this difference. So my aim was to find the tendencies, to try to outline tendencies, for example, to find obstacles for cultural participation. I also prepare publication concerning this concerning pre-existence of diaspora. That's an interesting question, really, because, for example, Italy was a country of prime destination in 90s for Ukrainians and for Ukrainian women in particular, because of the speciality of labor market here in Italy. And it was primarily women migration here in Italy. And in some years, it contested with Poland at different periods. Poland or Italy took the first place among the countries of destination for Ukrainian migrants of pre-war period. Concerning the terms between migrant and refugee and asylum seeker, yes, it is also a point for discussion, but in my research, I take it in general meaning. Migrant is as a more general meaning, and refugee is a person who fled Ukraine due to war circumstances. Really, very few Ukrainians apply for asylum. Really few Ukrainians apply for legal refugee status, because it is a quite clear difference in legal status between temporary protection, persons under temporary protection, and persons under refugee status. Ukrainians, luckily, do not need to apply to refugee status until temporary protection directive is ongoing to the spring of 2025. So in this meaning, concerning the perception of the term refugee by Ukrainian migrants, by the way, thank you, Oliver, for such a turn of our discussion. Really, some Ukrainians, even my respondents, even were offended when they were called refugees. They replied, "We're not refugees. We're Europeans. We're not refugees." So even in the perception of people who arrived from Ukraine, they do not want some of them, because I didn't track the statistics. It was not my point for research, but it is just like an interesting aspect that some Ukrainians were offended when they were compared to refugees from Syria or from Asian and African countries. They thought, we are not refugees. We're just Ukrainians who are temporary, stay in Europe. And this temporality also is an interesting point for research, by the way, because very many people, one of the obstacles for the integration is that they do not want to stay in Europe, and they want to go home, they want to return to Ukraine. This is also a point for finding specificities into policies towards Ukrainian displaced, towards people displaced from Ukraine. If I answered your questions.
Yes, thank you. It was very clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Olga?
Thank you very much, Marina, for your interesting presentation. I have a question related on the question of Olivier about this relation between the host society and the Ukrainian refugees. Do you think that this insistence on Europeanness among refugees compared to the population, Ukrainian population that remained in Ukraine, may have this kind of relational or interactional character? You said that some of you interviewees were surprised by the comments or reactions about their ability to use computer or other things. And maybe I was wondering if there somehow normative insistence on Europeanness can be kind of reaction to these perceived disqualifying discourses. You see, when they in the host society they were subject to this kind of discourses, do you know to use a computer? The reaction was the insistence on their own Europeanness. So maybe we talk about this kind of relation.
Yes, I understand what you're talking about. Yes, I do not think it is connected because actually this level of Europeanness, or maybe, but I think it needs further research, because the level of Europeanness among Ukrainians was rather high before war, and at the moment of the vast invasion began, actually this increasing was very significant from the 2014 to 2022, and yes, by aspect which may influence this perception themselves as Europeans among Ukrainian refugees, as very many of them saw the European way of life, and so. Some of them replied in interviews that they had exaggerated, that they had more ideal image of Europe than it turned to be in reality. And they told that very many issues in Ukraine are developed much higher than in Europe. For example, you saw it my some last slides, that perception, for example, bank sphere, the internet connection, the post services, medical services, but this opinion is divided into availability of medicine and easy access to medicine, and the quality of medical services, because availability is better in Ukraine, but the quality is better in Europe. About the education, again, the opinion divided, that primary and secondary education is better in Ukraine and higher education is better in Europe. Where is that point of not? Where is that point which divides it? It's also interesting topic to find out. So maybe this comparison, maybe that people lived in Europe for some months, then years, they saw the practices which led them feel that Ukraine is not less Europe than Europe itself. Very many respondents mentioned that Ukraine is absolutely European, because one of the questions was, what should Ukraine, to your opinion, borrow from Europe first of all? And many respondents mentioned that we do not practically need to borrow something, because Ukraine has everything and has very many things to be proud and to be followed even by European countries. So Ukraine also can be a good example for Europeans. And as for this position that about computers, I have also very interesting mentioning of, have you ever seen a washing? This is a washing machine. Have you ever seen a washing machine? And our respondents were surprised, but well, we also have washing machines even in villages. And this is a dishwasher. Do you know what dishwasher is? You put dishes there and it washes them. So our people were Ukrainians, I mean, my Ukrainian respondents were maybe surprised and somehow offended that, well, what Europeans think about Ukraine and Ukrainians. Ukraine is not so poor. Ukraine is a highly developed country, and many Ukrainians lived absolutely successful life and had everything. So this is a disputable question. I think that to find out the factors which influence this opinion, we should hold some more additional researches.
So if I may add here is that Ukraine was not any touristic destination for the French or other West Europeans, and they were very well. The contacts between Western Europe and Ukraine before the war were not very intense. So maybe these misunderstandings come from lack of knowledge.
And not only this, I think that Ukrainian state institutions also should conduct appropriate foreign policy, implementing this image of Ukraine, proper image of Ukraine abroad, because Ukraine now loses much in this information war, I would say. Very many things had to be done before the war started. In order, actually, from the very period of independence, Ukraine had to work thoroughly about its foreign image.
Okay.
This is the point which is not a strong point, unfortunately, of Ukrainian policy, and the point to think over and to conduct appropriate policies.
I have a short question, but not so easy one, a methodological one. And maybe it's the question to Marina, but maybe to other participants as well. It's about using opposing values in any survey methods. I think that when you ask anybody about their commitment to, I don't know, the human rights or the respect for the rule of law, even persons with their very authoritarian attitudes would say that these values are important. So this is why we often use opposing values, meaning that, for instance, by phrasing the questions, which value would be more important, or what priority we would give to one value out of two values. For instance, I just remember the study by Engelhardt, who was researching modern and postmodern values, and he was opposing freedom or self-expression to the rules of order and safety for all people in the society, meaning asking what would be for you most important, or what the nation should be, the government should be putting the priority on from these two values. But when I saw the questions that you asked, whether do you feel more Ukrainian or more European, I felt a little bit uneasy, because especially now with war, when there is this rise in national feelings, in patriotic feelings, which is very important for the Ukrainians. It's a matter of survival for the country and for the nation. Having to choose between feeling European or feeling more Ukrainian is quite disturbing and difficult for people to choose from. So many of them, they chose, I feel as much Ukrainian as European, but there were some who felt more Ukrainian than European, because maybe they just felt that the commitment to their country of origin must be more important, especially in the conditions of war. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for this question. Surely, in our research, in our actually two researches, we combine different types of questions, direct and indirect. Studying European values, I absolutely agree with you that I think that this combined methodology should be applied, and let me share the screen with you. It is not translated yet, but this is the result of the second research conducted within the Chernihiv region. And here we can see the statistics. Here we can see the example of application of non-direct questions in measuring European values. For example, everyone. Do you agree or do you not agree with this statement that everyone should have the freedom of thought, that personal choice of the way of life should be respected, and the law should be equal to everyone, and so on and so forth? So this type of questions is also about Europeanness, it's also about European values, but they are not named directly. The question which you have mentioned about do you feel yourself European or Ukrainian, it is a question exactly borrowed from the Eurobarometer, and the peculiarity is that I am not allowed even to change the sequence of answers. So it is also about methodology. Here at European University Institute, we had representatives last year when we designed this questionnaire. We had representatives of European Commission and particular from the migration, I do not remember now the title of that department, but we discussed this questionnaire, and he says he forbade to even to change the places of the answers. It is important. First of all, it let us to compare with the researches made by Eurobarometer about Europeanness among Europeans. It is a correlation between European identity and national identity, which is, and national identity is put on the first place. So it is adopted by European Commission, actually. So that's why we also included it in order to have a possibility to compare the results. Unfortunately, Eurobarometer is about Europeanness is not hold these years. The latest was, if I'm not mistaken, in 2014. So I'm excited about the new edition of Eurobarometer concerning Europeanness, which led us maybe to compare somehow with the results of the period of war. How did it change the Europeanness of Europeans? That's why that was the reason to put the questions in such a way. I have many tables, but unfortunately I do not have a time within one presentation to share with every result. So thank you for your question. And I see something in the chat.
Yeah, it's persons are leaving us. Yeah.
Okay.
So we will finish here. I will just say to our YouTube public that we will still have 2 webinars before this summer holidays. One about Ukrainians on the au marché immobilier français, about renting apartments and houses, I guess. And then fertility attitudes and decisions among Ukrainians migrants and war migrants in Poland in June. Thank you, Marina. I will just stop recording now.